and let us all do we can to build a better future.
But I've been heavily critical of the Democratic Party because I believe that more or less the Democratic establishment is able to successfully put on a happy, smiley face to convince voters, dare I say it, swindle voters into thinking that they care about Medicare for all or student debt forgiveness or the other variety of issues. So let's address the old king himself, Joe Biden, and the Democratic establishment.
Well, I thought you were going to say Martin Luther King.
No.
There's a different kind of king. There's kind of king, brother. Okay, I got
there's different type of things, but when I look at Joe Biden, I can't help but think of somebody from antiquity that clearly is no longer fit for office. He shows signs, in my opinion, of dementia and Alzheimer's, but that's a whole other conversation altogether. But I want to talk about the Democratic Party and Biden. Already, corporate media has been smearing you, indicating that you're going to be a spoiler candidate and that you are going to disrupt everything and you're going to help Trump, which again I find completely fraudulent because the whole idea of politics is earning someone's vote. Now, when we bring up the Democratic Party, many things have happened under this administration where it happened under Trump. People would be screaming from the rooftops and the media would be spinning in its own way. But under Biden's administration, Roe v. Wade died. I remember activists and social justice warriors saying that they would be flooding the streets if that happened under Trump. We saw what happened to affirmative action not just 2 days ago. 2 days ago, I believe, or it happened on Thursday, I believe, where affirmative action gone like that under the Supreme Court. We see what happened to LGBTQ rights gone under this Supreme Court. And then finally, and this is a huge shout out to my colleague, Colin, who is part of the Indie News Network. Again, student debt forgiveness dismissed immediately. All these things happening under a Democratic administration when more or less I've been hearing from this, especially from the people who do carry water for the Democratic Party, Bernie, AOC, all the entire members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, anyone that says vote blue no matter who, that the Democrats are the best option. How do we really engage with these neoliberal Democrats that are more or less implementing these policies that lead to more corporatization of our government, the idea of these top 1%ers dictating policies while our politicians, being their loyal puppets, are writing these laws? And more or less, Biden is at the head of this. What is your plan to engage with the Biden campaign of 2024? One, outmaneuver the corporate media that's going to be smearing you. And then three, dealing with the Democratic establishment that is going to be vilifying you on par with what happened to Ralph Nader, Dr. Jill Stein, and to some extension, even though it was the Republicans who vilified him, Ross Perot.
Well, I mean, brother, I've been vilified so many times before. I've been demonized so many times before. I think so much of what you say is simply speaking the truth. If you're going to speak the truth and be demonized, then so be it. The Democratic Party is a party that's dominated by corporate power, and its progressive wing is window dressing. I was with my dear Bernie twice, as you know, and he was treated unjustly. He was treated unfairly. They were not interested in democratic processes within the Democratic Party. They were interested in projecting Bernie as some kind of integral member, but he was pushed out when it looked as if he was going to win. I was with him in Nevada. We broke bread that night when it looked as if he was winning, and Obama makes the phone call, the neoliberals drop out. Now, when it comes to Biden himself, that's a longer story. You see, my dear brother Joe Biden is connected to three very ugly crimes against humanity. One was the invasion and occupation of Iraq. Over 500,000 precious people killed in Iraq. No mention of it. Second is mass incarceration. He was one of the architects of one of the most barbaric systems known and created in the last 50 years. I've taught in prison for 41 years. I've seen the brothers, not all of them black and brown, but disproportionately black and brown. Each one of them, no matter what color, precious. The third was the bailing out of Wall Street. It had unbelievable crushing impact on everyday people, losing their property, losing their wealth with no accountability. Those are crimes against humanity. And I haven't even got to the Middle East. I haven't even got to the silence when it comes to Palestinians and the vicious Israeli occupation and so forth. There's other moments in U.S. foreign policy that Biden has not seen a war that he doesn't get excited about. And we're seeing this right now with Ukraine. And we can talk about Ukraine as well, because that's on the way to World War III. It's a proxy with a proxy war with the Russians. Now, I'm in deep solidarity with Ukrainian brothers and sisters in terms of their suffering, but there's no doubt that under the Democratic Party and under Biden, you got this intense provocation with the extension of NATO. Russia was promised they would not move 1 inch toward Russia. And now 13 former Soviet countries with missiles in Romania and Poland headed toward Moscow. Can you imagine what America would do if Russia had missiles in Canada and Mexico geared toward Chicago? They would blow them to smithereens the next day. That's how empires behave. That's how empires behave.
So then what
the American empire was great. So you have to, and that's not anti-American. That's the truth.
And
the question becomes, how do you talk about the truth in relation to justice so that Biden himself becomes one with his militarism, Biden himself with his hypocrisy, and also his condition. And I pray for his condition in terms of decline of cognitive powers, because that's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to me. It's a human thing, but we just don't need presidents who are undergoing that process in public. That's all. But we have to be honest about that.
But
and so the question becomes, you got gangster, neo-fascist gangster Trump pushing towards second civil war, and you got Biden pushing toward a third world war, and yet the Democratic Party wants to act as if it is some party of peace and justice. That's a lie. We just have to call it for what it is.
So then two follow-ups in regards to this. So you are going to be unabashedly going to engage the Democratic Party because, I mean, let's face it, there's no walking around it. They are going to be smearing you and attacking you. So you will push back against the Democratic Party, because it's one thing to point out. And again, this is something I was disappointed with the Green Party in 2020, where everyone was still suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. I get it. Trump triggers a lot of people. But when you have somebody like Howie Hawkins say, well, maybe it's better for people to support Biden. And then obviously he's running in the Green Party. I mean, I don't know where that fits into anyone's political motivation. You're running for office, but you say, hey, vote for my opponent. You are fully on board with staying with your campaign, staying with your message, but also engaging with the smears and the Democratic establishment, as well as the Biden campaign as they come after you, correct?
Ready, prepared, and I think in the end, able to deal with any smears they have coming at me to the degree to which I'm committed to truth and justice. Now, if it's a critique and it turns out I'm wrong, I admit I'm wrong. I'm a human being and so forth. But I'm certainly going to be standing. And keep in mind, brother, I'm not really standing in any way by myself. I want to reemphasize over and over again, this is a moment in a movement. Right? We got strikes coming up in just a few weeks. I want to see which side these politicians are on. I'm on the workers' side.
I see the Democrats and Republicans going with the establishment.
Top City. Let's see where the politicians come down. Democrats and Republicans. You see what I mean? These are the kind of issues where you have to put your body, your word, and your commitment to your cause, and not just your little flashy brand. Most of these politicians just have a brand. They don't have a cause.
Now, and I'm actually glad you brought that up about the strikes, because again, when we see what's happening right now, and obviously I know the answer to your question in regards to where the politicians will stand with Cop City or with workers. I mean, they're going to go with the establishment through and through. I mean, the Democrats and Republicans are both uncreative in my mind, and I know what's expected of them because they are not creative people. And I don't want to go any further because, again, it's pretty offensive. I don't view these politicians as people, but that's a whole other story.
They're still human beings. They're just cowardly. They're cowardly human beings.
You are a better man than me. You are a far better man than me. But with that being said,
yes.
With in regards towards these strikes and obviously what's going to be happening with Cop City and how it's going to be covered by the media has its narrative. But unfortunately, in this day and age, there is mass surveillance happening on American citizens, and not to mention ridiculous internet censorship and corporate media bias as favored by big tech. We here at Hard Lens Media were censored not once but 8 times by YouTube, and thankfully, due to our wonderful audience made of various people of the different political spectrum, but also our allies in independent media. Shout out to Jimmy Dore, INN News, Convo Couch, RBN, and so many others. Apologies if I'm missing you guys. But, we were able to at least stand up against this censorship. But obviously, independent media is needed to cover these stories. But yet, anytime there is an alternative opinion, big tech, corporate media, the establishment is quick to call for censorship. Anytime there's a whistleblower or an activist or a journalist who heroically shares information, case in point, a gentleman named Edward, who is, again, I got to be careful with the YouTube algorithm, unfortunately, because it gets triggered, who is somewhere in the Asian continent, snowed in somewhere. And then, of course, you've got an individual named Julian Assange, who is wrongfully in prison. So what is your plan to really deal with and either that end this ridiculous surveillance and censorship that is happening to the American people? Because the First Amendment is fundamentally important. Free speech is needed to hold those people in power accountable. And if that's gone, then we have nothing. And what do we have? We already know we live in an oligarchy. We don't have a republic. It just pretends to be a republic and tries to convince voters that their votes do matter. So what is your plan in really dealing with the surveillance and the censorship that is impacting every single citizen across the political spectrum and generation?
Yeah, so one is to have a vigilant defense of free speech. You remember that wonderful line that Socrates gives during the trial when he says, the cause of my unpopularity was parrhesia. That's the Greek word for free speech, plain speech, frank speech, unintimidated speech, unafraid speech, the speech that you can raise from the depths of your soul. You cannot have a decent society, let alone a democratic society, without free speech across the board. So I stand with you and all the others in terms of fighting any form of censorship. It's fundamental, it's basic in that regard. But we also know that censorship is always part and parcel of any structure of domination. It's part and parcel of any power elite at the top that do not want the truth to be exposed, because it renders them invisible. It renders them naked in terms of their often deep tilts toward mendacity, cruelty, and rendering invisible the suffering of folk. And that's really the important role here, though. You see that when you don't have free speech, it means in fact that the most vulnerable suffering is often rendered invisible. And when it's invisible, it means it doesn't count. It doesn't matter. No, there's human beings down there who are being rendered invisible. And I come from a tradition of Black folk. What is our anthem? Lift every voice.
And sing.
It says sing, you're right. It says sing, but it doesn't say lift every echo. It's if you're in a silo and you're just an extension of a silo, that's an echo. No, you can't be a jazz man or a blues woman if you just echo. You got to find your voice. And a voice is like a fingerprint. It's unique and singular. And that's precisely why what you are doing and the others, raising your distinctive voices. But of course, when it's a threat to the powers that be, then censorship will follow you.